the reason this thing is going to continue exploding is because everybody has some relationship with that part of their life, identity, health, even more than like a Viagra, right? A lot of people age out of the Viagra market, or like their behavior changes where Viagra is no longer
age
something.
in sometimes too.
Yeah, Jack, you got the wrong order of operation, dude.
Welcome to another episode of No Investment Advice. We've got the NIA Boys here today. Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value, Trung fan, me Master Flex himself, and Bilal Zaidi. I'm a little off today, boys. What's going on?
This is take number 7, by the way. Bilal, we are on take number 7.
What happened there? I've been stuttering on that one. But yeah, boys, we got a lot to talk about this week. We're going to have a funny little throwback meme in a week in a second, but we're going to be talking a little bit about Chris Rock's new special on Netflix. I know we're all fans of comedy here. Jack has been doing some cool stuff on Balaji's new upcoming book. And Trung's going to break down the obesity drug that is taking over the world right now. But boys, let's start off with this meme of the week because it is an absolute throwback. And I saw this a few days ago and I was crying, man. Let me just pull this up here. Was it me who shared this or Jack? Because I feel like it's one of us two. Jack, do you remember sharing this?
I think it was you.
I mean, it feels very Jack, to be honest, as well. But let me go share sound.
Stocks on an app called Rocks.
So how do we make money from home? For starters, this is not a sponsored video. We just get this question all the time, and honestly, the answer is really simple.
So basically, I just trade stocks on an app called Robinhood, which I left a link in our bio if you want to check it out. It's free to download, free to sign up. They actually give you a free stock, so they're paying you to sign up. But again, not sponsored. And I know trading sounds intimidating. Here's my strategy in a nutshell. I see a stock going up and I buy it, and I just watch it until it stops going up, and then I do that over and over, and it pays for our whole lifestyle.
So,
how much you can make.
I can't keep going. All right, that's enough.
Yo,
that's enough.
Is that for real?
Oh, yeah.
Is that
It's
for real?
deadly serious.
That's not a joke.
That was deadly serious.
Oh my God, dude.
A throwback that is, though. Boys,
Do you reckon that guy's a CFA fan? What do you reckon?
Well, honestly, sounds like he's outperforming me, so.
Either way, he's going to be getting a legal case thrown his way soon, Mo.
Let me tell you about that guy. That guy sounds like a Michael Saylor thing. I, Mr. CFA, know enough to hurt myself. This guy just knows to look, and that chart, is it going up?
Don't you think sometimes in life, though, that is how a lot of people are just very happy, like obviously beyond the Robinhood trading, but like, there's a lot of people who just are so simple-minded, but they're like 10 times happier than all of us because they're not overthinking it. They're just, just getting on with their life. I think that guy is in that bucket, you know what I mean? All right, boys, let's talk about what's going on. Trung, you mentioned you watched the Chris Rock special. What did you think of it, man?
I didn't think it was very good, to be honest. I know it's different. You said that I didn't watch it live, but it was live. Like they did it like at this time. The Chris Rock special stars. Was that the first time Netflix has ever done that?
I think so. I mean, I think so. Yeah, it was like a live stream, and then it was a bit confusing when I watched it on demand too. And you go in, and you're like, "Why is it starting halfway through?" It was saying it was like 1 hour in, and then when it finished, it said like, "Stay on for the after show," and then nothing happened. It was kind of weird.
Because there was like 90 minutes before, or they just had it running,
right? It was like a pre-show as well, yeah.
So, I mean, Chris Rock has some of the best. Bigger and Blacker is one of the greatest.
Never Scared
comedy.
Is tough one.
Never Scared. He's probably 3 of the 10, 20 greatest stand-ups ever. I thought this one was not very good. It felt like a less good one of Chappelle. Like a recent Chappelle one. Like we spent the first 20 minutes talking about the woke stuff, which honestly at this point is kind of played out. But what I will say is this. The last 10 minutes, and this isn't really a giveaway, but there's a whole segment, but he goes off on Will Smith. It made it worth it.
That's the clips that are circulating. Jack, you said you saw some clips, right? Was that of the Will Smith?
Yeah,
was that the Will Smith one?
Yeah, the Will Smith, which, I haven't.
Yeah.
All
I say is like, it's not a spoiler alert. It's like, Dad, but for me, that whole segment on Will Smith made it worth it. But I'll tell you something I'd never seen before. And it's because it was a live stream. He completely messed up a joke.
And he kind of like called it out. Like I did in the beginning of the show.
And he went, and he just went, I'd never see, like, obviously because with the specials, they're cut and edited. This one was super live, and he just went, "Oh, I messed up the joke."
Yeah,
and
he like tells you that, and then you
Yeah.
realize after, because I was confused.
Yeah.
And then a minute later, he says a punchline to something.
Yeah,
And I was like,
yeah.
oh, now I get why he said that. Yeah.
It obviously completely ruined the joke, but like I'm like, oh, that's really cool that we got to see like
Yeah.
somebody do that. But
It's kind of
yeah, what
like
about
if you see, yeah, well, similar. I mean, he's like basically growing up, he was my favorite stand-up comedian. I think Dave Chappelle took over later for me, but growing up, like those two that you mentioned were like my favorite stand-ups. And then Eddie Murphy as well, like Delirious and Raw were really incredible as well. But yeah, I feel similar. Like, I don't know if it's also just the way my expectation going in, and because there was the Will Smith stuff, you're kind of there for that. And it was like, you know, obviously towards the end. I thought that part was actually kind of funny to me, but it was more like worth me watching just to kind of see what he wanted to do as a reaction. And again, without spoiling it too much, it did feel very much like he looked real hurt, man. Like towards the end, I'm like, man, this really hit him, sort of thing.
the
So
Will
anyway,
Smith
we don't
thing,
want to.
he was choked. Like he's like,
Yeah. I mean, I could imagine.
Spoiler. I'll just say one thing. He's like, I truly admired Will Smith. I wanted him to win, right? That's what he said, and and you could tell he meant it. Anyways,
Yeah. But I think the reason it's relevant to the pod, I think what you mentioned there, it was like a live stream. So I do think that's interesting for Netflix to do a live stream comedy thing. There aren't that many examples of that. I know we talked about Andrew Schultz quite a lot on the pod. He did a live stream thing. Did Louis do a live stream as well? Because I know
don't know
Louis
if he did it on Netflix, but
no, not on Netflix, but he might. I wonder if he did one
no, he
himself.
did. He did because when he took it on his own website, and he didn't want to go through the like the traditional middle people. What I will say, and I love that you brought it up, is this is such an interesting example of like how Netflix needs to win, right? Or there's this idea that the Netflix model of dropping all these shows at one, for a season, they'll just drop every episode, versus HBO, which is still going week by week, and then you'll get stuff like White Lotus, which we need to hear Jack's thoughts on later or eventually. But Jack finally got into White Lotus. But the week by week builds up like, you know, the water cooler talk, the message boards, what's happening next week, what's going to go on in the episode.
Yeah.
Like, people really talk about it. So there's that argument basically between the Squid Game model where you just drop everything at once, becomes a
like
massive
the binge
hit,
watch, right? Versus
like
it used to be
where
on
you're
TV.
culturally relevant appointment viewing.
Well, it's interesting though, because I find that I got so used to the Netflix model, but then now the best shows I've watched in the last few years they're basically all been on HBO.
It's HBO, yeah.
It's like White Lotus, Succession, even like I just started, it's not at the same level, but there's a new one on Amazon about this band. It's Something in the Six. Do you see this? That's actually, it's based on a novel. It's decent actually. But like we've already watched 3 episodes and I'm like ready for the next one. And I have to wait, but it kind of builds up the anticipation. Right. And now we're going to be talking about it for a longer period of time. I'm also going to be paying for the subscription for 3 months versus just binging it and canceling. So it kind of makes sense, right? Like,
dude, I
for
do
them to
that
do
all
that.
the. You're so funny about the binging and canceling. You end up saving like $80 a year. Like
So
my wife has Rakuten, which is some Asian network.
Yeah.
We flip between Disney, HBO, Netflix, and it's just so funny.
Hulu's been doing it as well.
Let me
Jack, were you still watching? Sorry, Jack, did you still keep watching White Lotus? So you finished it now?
I finished it, yeah.
The last season?
There's 2 seasons, right?
Yeah, you're fully caught up.
The second.
Yeah.
So hit us.
Yeah. It was great. I thought it was sick.
You liked it. All right, good. I'm glad.
Glad. I'm trying to think. I think I marginally preferred the first season, which I think that's unpopular, right? Everybody else thinks the second is, or a lot of people saying the second was stronger.
I preferred the second, but the first was great too. Yeah.
It was class. Yeah. And I love that guy. I don't know his name, but the guy that played the like con artist on the boat in the second season.
Oh,
He was in
what legend,
night manager.
Tom Hollander?
Yeah. And he was in a bunch of, he was in The Thick of It, or the spin-off of The Thick of It, in The Loop.
Yeah.
The guy is absolute G.
What a legend.
Class.
What a ledge. Yeah. Quality TV, boys. Some of the best stuff that's come out in the last few years.
Because I remember when you first watched it, you were like, I couldn't get into it, and I felt the same. But then once you watch a couple episodes, it gets good.
Yeah, I guess that like I didn't get I don't know what it was about that first episode, but just like those two, I think it was those two girls getting into that hotel room and just like, I was like, I'm not watching this shit. And then we gave it 10 more minutes after that moment. The second time I was like, oh, now I get it. Like all the characters coming together and you're like watching this thing unfold across. It was great.
Jack's very decisive. I love that. I'm not watching this shit.
He's
Silly,
done.
turn it off.
Throws
Done.
the TV out.
You know, when you got a few hours of precious time in evening,
that's true. Yeah.
you can't be wasting it on poor quality media. But it was great.
Nice, man. And then the reason I brought that up was the last thing on Chris Rock, because Trung, you were asking what I thought of it. And another thing I noticed was the sound for me, and this might be just my ears are a little bit more sensitive to this stuff, but live comedy, like if you go from a comedy cellar style, like being in a comedy club versus being in a stadium versus watching at home, and like Chris Rock is a great example. I've seen him in all three of those, and when you see like in the room, in a small room, it's incredible, right? Because like the laughter bounces off the walls and the ceiling, and it's like the energy, and you really need that kind of like feedback loop of laughter. And like fake laughter doesn't really work, obviously, is with like stand-up comedy. And then in an arena, I almost find it very hard to find it super funny as well. And on TV, it's even worse because you're not getting that atmosphere. And my friend this morning had said like he went to the live show and he loved it. And so I'm just curious. I'm interested to think like how much it would have been different, like being live for something like that versus at home. My expectation is just so high. It's like one of the best stand-up comedians, and he's had all these amazing banger stand-up specials before. But anyway, so yeah, we can move on from that. But I think that was another thing I noticed where I was like, it's not. I needed to put the volume up almost, and I switched to my AirPods, and I was like kind of zoned in, and that helped a little bit.
Look at Trung's audio setup.
It's of humor.
Exactly what I was just going to say. Look at Trung's, what's in front of Trung right now is a product of Bilal's spine ears.
There we go.
I saw Ricky Gervais at Madison Square Garden. And also if you're sat next to somebody who's laughing at the wrong stuff.
Yeah, the wrong stuff. Yeah.
Objectively the wrong stuff. Like as the
like
comedian intended the punchline.
Really messes with the vibe.
Yeah, for God's sake, man.
Ricky Gervais, what a legend.
I saw Tim Dillon at a small place in Nashville a couple months ago. That was ace.
Yeah.
Ace. Not a comedy club, like a small theater class. But it does make a big difference.
Jack loves live shows, people.
Oh, yeah.
This is what I've learned.
Well, Nashville's pretty good for live stuff, right? Like live music. They've got a lot of events going on.
Music City Boys, yeah.
There we go. All right, boys, should we move on before that was a little quick TV chat for you guys, but we're going to get onto the obesity drugs, but real quickly, Jack, you've been working on, Balaji has a new book that's been done by Eric Jorgensen called The Anthology of Balaji. I don't know when it's coming out, but do you want to tell us a little bit about it and what you've been doing?
Soon, yeah. So if you're not familiar with the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, that was like the first in... I don't know how Eric would describe it, but kind of a series of these style of books that he's doing, which are basically taking all of the published work of somebody and compiling them into a book. So for Naval, took tweets, podcasts, interviews, like old blog posts, and just distilled them and categorized them and organized them into this great book. And I illustrated a bunch of those concepts I'd already illustrated because I've been consuming Naval's work before that book had started to be worked on. But I reached out to Eric. I was like, I have these. If you want to include them, I'd be honored. And he put the book together, sent me the manuscript, and there was a bunch more ideas that I worked on after that. And then basically the same thing happened for this book where he's compiled all this stuff, invited me to the document, look through it. There's a bunch of amazing observations, ideas, etc. in there that turned into illustrations, and should be, I think it's a couple of months, the timeline right now. I don't know exactly. Yeah, but it should be good. And I'll actually...
You want to tease a little example of one of the ideas or something like that?
Yeah, let me, I'm just going to read this off the website. So there's a few of the chapters. Why all value becomes digital, how technology creates value, technology creates more technology, misalignment of modern media, don't argue, build, hiring and growing great teams, founding countries, how Balaji invests, all that stuff. So just all of these models that have obviously been present in his career and stuff that he's done, obviously incredibly talented and smart dude. We've always referenced in his ideas on this pod. Let me pull a couple. Sure, Eric won't mind if I give a little tease
sneak
on this.
preview. Here we go, exclusive here.
This stuff is out there.
No,
This stuff is out there, but it's not been organized in this way yet. So one of my favorites, getting an MBA to learn about doing a startup is a bit like getting a physics PhD to learn about riding a bike.
That's so ridiculous.
Class.
I had to switch the camera view here, so we got Trung's face here. For people, new listeners here, Trung is an MBA CFA. Trung, your reaction to
what
this?
do I think about that? Correct.
Yeah.
Not much more to add after that, 100%. But yeah, it looks really sick. Looks really sick.
It's gonna be great, man. It's I'm assuming it's gonna be free digitally, and then you can buy a copy of it. Yeah, I teased these out, made it so you can't read them yet, but that'll be coming soon.
Killing it.
A lot of great ideas in there, man. Excited about that, and obviously the network state. I think he brought that out middle of last year or something. Everyone
That's
should
a
pick
book,
that
but
up.
also a podcast now.
Yeah, podcast.
He just had Vitalik on it.
Yeah.
No, he
And I
had
think
Vitalik. He had Toby from Shopify and Kaz.
And a head of state. I forget where from, but he had a head of state on there. Yeah.
It was like I think it's an Asia South
Badass.
Pacific country. I gotta check that.
Sick.
But yeah.
But when this is coming out, 100%, we got at least ask Balaji to come on, share some of this with us. I know Eric
doubt.
would definitely
Forward
come on.
by Mark Andreessen.
Incredible.
So
That heavy
that
hitters.
lineup on there, yeah.
Yeah, I just scrolled through on the website, like the selected chapters looks pretty ridiculous. I mean, this is like right up our alley. We could do a 12-hour episode with Balaji if he's down. Open invite,
let me
Balaji, if you're listening.
Let me do a few.
I need a couple of
two
these
more.
for that 12-hour one. For the listeners, I got the zero. Your boy now does zero sugar Red Bull.
You're switching up, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, not the
on
low
a health
sugar.
kick right there.
Nice.
Zero.
I like that transition coming from Trump. We're going to talk about obesity drugs coming here. So, zero sugar. Jack, were you about to say something else before we move on?
I'm just going to close with one more quote from the book.
Do it,
says, in hindsight, everyone believes they'd take the risk and get in early, yet another risky early opportunity is in front of you today.
Look at that. That invitation. Look at that. Beautiful.
Shivering.
There we go.
You know,
All right,
you know that
beautiful.
meme with the hair? The hair goes up on the arm? Man, I just got that. My hair is up, boys.
All right, Trung, let's thanks for sharing that, Jack. Trung, let's talk about this obesity drug situation. I wanted you to give us the breakdown, but I'll just read out your first tweet here. By 2031, the market for obesity treatment drugs, aka GLP-1 agonists, will be more than $150 billion. That is on par with all drugs to treat cancer, which totaled $185 billion in 2021, per The Economist. That is insane. Also, we should say this is not medical advice. You should speak to your physician
this is not
before we
medical
talk
advice.
about any of this stuff. But go for it.
Yeah, I think this is just worthwhile talk about because this topic, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen it bubble up. So over the past year, it kind of felt actually like generative AI in a sense for the health space. It's like something that is so overarching and just kind of consumes the healthcare space the way that AI is kind of consuming tech. I mean, Jack, you mentioned earlier that your sister-in-law wrote something about the drug, which for the listeners, this anti-obesity treatment started off as a treatment for diabetes. And the drug that the name of it, Bilal mentioned that they're known as GLP-1 agonist. That's the class of drug. But the kind of the brand name itself is Ozempic. That was for the diabetes treatment. But people, as we know, as many of you probably know, there's always off-the-shelf or off-the-label uses for drugs, right? The most famous example, not necessarily off the label, but a side effect one of the most famous is Viagra. In the early 1990s, Pfizer was testing a drug to treat angina, which is when you get chest pains because the blood vessels are constricting too much and you're not getting oxygen-rich blood to your heart. So
There we go, medical fan coming through. You got doctors in the family.
This is the running joke I make. I'm not a doctor, but I'm a doctor's brother.
Jesus Christ.
No, but that's the dumbest joke.
Is this sort of akin to the discovery of penicillin, right?
Yeah, and it was which was an accident, which is also an accident. They found it from this kind of, I forget what they're molding on, but exactly.
Bread.
Yeah, on bread. There you go. So Pfizer was creating this drug. So how do you fix a constriction problem? You dilate it, right? So you dilate the blood vessels. And that drug, it didn't work for the chest region. It worked for a...
Imagine the room where they're testing that. How can you get that? Just hilarious, man. Like someone goes in for the trial of that, and that's... Excuse me.
Well, dude,
yeah.
It's cool. So the drug name is sildenafil. I mean, I butchered it, but listen, I'm sure some of you listeners have dabbled with the street name Viagra or Cialis, right? But how funny is that as a side effect? So Pfizer actually lost the patent on that, so you can get a generic now. I've never done it.
What? And man, that's got to be a fascinating world, like drug patents. What, it just got so
20 years.
universal?
They had the 20-year limit, yeah. So they started selling 1998.
20 years.
Dude, how crazy is that, though? So Viagra is obviously one of the most well-known, pharmaceuticals, right? Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think, definitely.
In popular culture.
Yeah, I mean, if it's been on South Park and it's been on The Simpsons, then it's definitely got to be up there, right?
Everyone knows what Viagra is up to. But that's interesting, right? So go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I freelanced at an agency in New York once that had a healthcare floor. So you walk through that and they have war rooms trying to name these fucking, ridiculous drugs.
That's incredible, yeah.
Oh my God.
That sounds like a sitcom right there, man. That's like The Office, but imagine The Office but for that.
Dude,
Ozempic, they've landed Ozempic, they've landed on that through 800 revisions of all these other compound stupid words.
Give me 1 second, boys. I'm running out of power here. My laptop is plugged in only on one side.
All right, do it.
You need a double. You need a double, mate.
Well, you got two. I didn't even know you could do that. You could plug in your laptop twice.
Out.
What is going on here? Anyway, we could keep chatting. But wait, Jack, have you heard much about this yourself?
Yeah, can you tell us about your sister-in-law and what you know about her coverage?
So she started working for Barry Weiss's new publication, The Free Press. Her name's Olivia Reingold. We should put a link to the article in the show notes. But she wrote mostly about the usage of the drug as a lifestyle, lifestyle maybe not the right word, but people using it for
losing
purposes
weight
outside of treating diabetes, basically.
Yeah.
And how that's causing shortages and how it's putting pressure on the market for people that are using it in the medical context.
Diabetes / obesity, like that.
Right.
What its said purpose is. That's actually a great point. And so I'd like to break it down like this. I'd like to break it down as what is the obesity problem? What does this drug do? And then, Jack, what you kind of mentioned is A, what are the societal impacts? And B, what are the downsides? There's some really big ones. There's a concern that this may create even more inequality in the sense of who has the highest rate of obesity, low-income people. These drugs are not cheap. They're $1,000 a month, and it's to your point, Jack, it's celebrities. Kim Kardashian is using Ozempic, or now they kind of made an official one. It's called Wegovy. And just as an idea, Viagra does $2 billion a year, or did when Pfizer had the patent. I don't know what the numbers are now. Wegovy will do $4 billion this year. So and then and now you're bringing in insurance, government health care, who gets what. So it's just it is a massive implication, right? But this is, well,
the market is also twice the size as Viagra by default, right?
Yeah. Yes. Wait, wow. I want you to think about what Jack just said.
Say it one more time, because I was reading side about this
The addressable market for these obesity treatment drugs is by definition twice the size of Viagra.
Jesus Christ, yeah. Boys, I mean, I will say, because so Trung, you've got doctors in your family. You were just about to say, but the summary from what I've read about it, I've heard like lots of people talk about it. I've heard like even people we know have taken this. I saw our boy Sam Parr wrote about this on Twitter, thinking like Jan 4th, and I was reading some of the responses there. That's why I was distracted. But I don't know if he took it, but I remember he was on like a big cut, and a lot of people are using it when they're like trying to cut. So the one of the things I do want to call out is that Rhonda Patrick, who I've listened to her stuff for like tens of hours, if not more, like hundreds of hours potentially. She's like a really legit doctor, been on Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss a bunch. Essentially, it just restricts your appetite, it suppresses your appetite, which makes sense for both obesity and diabetes as well, I guess. But there is like, it's being debated now, like how effective it is in terms of like the muscle loss part, which is actually a very negative side effect of this. So if you're losing weight, which is what most people think you're supposed to be doing, you're not actually just trying to lose weight, you're trying to lose fat. If you're losing muscle as well.
You don't want to lose muscle mass. You don't want to lose muscle mass.
And a lot of people hear that and they think, well, I don't need to be like big Arnold Schwarzenegger, I just need to like get the weight down. It's like if you keep the same amount of body fat, but your muscle is degrading, that is actually the worst thing. Like you're even higher at risk for certain diseases. You're not as strong. You can't sit down on your chair. You can't pick up your kids. That's basically, the medical side I do understand. And yeah, like a lot of these things, there's obviously not like,
well, you still have to take it every month, right? Like you still have to do the injection just like you do with insulin, right? And I mean, there are a lot of complications here. What I think why, and people are talking about a lot more in the last 3-4 months, right? Major podcasts on Ezra Klein. Yeah. Plain English.
It was on the All In pod. I know Jason talked about it, and I think he's taken it.
It's on the cover of The Economist. I mean, that's when you know it's reached peak like saturation in kind of business media world, right? It was on the cover of The Economist last week. And I think it's very important to cover. But here's the obesity problem, right? Same Economist article that I just referenced says that by the year 2035, 4 billion people will be overweight or obese, and that is 50% of the population above the age of 5.
That's wild.
It's a huge problem, right? And the second part of the problem is, what is the cost of that obesity in terms of lost productivity, people sick, premature deaths? They're estimating that's $4 trillion, which is the equivalent of 3% of global GDP, which is the equivalent of basically the COVID-19 pandemic happening every single year. So in terms of all those lost health and productivity statistics. But this is where it gets interesting. It's something that you kind of touched on below. It's this idea of how should we think about obesity, right? There's a lot of parts to the puzzle, but one thing which I think is extremely important is this. A lot of people associate obesity with willpower. And if somebody's overweight or obese, the thinking is typically, oh, this person does not know how to control or discipline their eating habits, right? There's that element of it too. Would you guys agree with that? It's like when you see, there's this idea, the idea that if somebody's overweight or obese, it's kind of on them, as in they're not eating correctly, they're not doing enough exercise.
It's not just that, but that's definitely a big part of it. It's personal responsibility, but there's, without going off on a big tangent, there's certain things that everyone thinks you're supposed to be doing that you could just be banging your head against the wall trying forever. And a lot of it is understanding the real fundamentals. And I think that's...
Well, what are the fundamentals, right? It's like eat clean foods, exercise 30 minutes a day, things of that nature.
Yeah, well, the principles really are you need to be in a calorific deficit to lose body fat, and to actually maintain muscle mass, you need to eat enough protein and you need to do resistance training. So you need to probably lift weights 3 days a week, or at least do push-ups and stuff like that. And then you also need to measure the correct things. You need to not just look at a scale, you need to look at body fat percentage, which most people don't do. So that is already like probably more advanced than 90% of what people are doing for their own measurement purposes. And the truth, it just comes back to the same thing. It's like what people measure, they will look at. So if they go on a scale once a week or every day, they're going to see that number go down and it's working. They're going to get back in that position. They're like, okay, now I've dropped 20 pounds or whatever. And the problem is 95% of people will go and put it back on. So that is really the root cause, is what are the behavior changes needed to maintain doing that. And I'm speaking as someone who's gone through this myself, right? So I'm actually in the process of a big cut since July. Quite a massive one right now. And so I've had to relearn a lot of the stuff.
You look great, bro. I remember
thanks,
you told me, because I saw you in New York.
Yeah, that was definitely the height of like bad state. But yeah, so now it's like I've basically quite a significant amount, but I've added in so much more of the, not just eating healthy, but doing weights, basically 3-4 times a week, but finding the stuff that's actually going to maintain, which is understanding what a calorie deficit looks like and maintenance calories looks like. So I think the problem is if you cut 10, 20 pounds and then you just go back to your old ways, you're just going to have the rebound, which 90% of people have. So that is kind of, I think this is a bit of an issue for a lot of people.
I love how you frame that, because that's exactly right. That's the mentality, and for 70 to 80% of the population, those actions you just described are effective. There is a segment of the population that where literally genetically, everything you said, they'll bounce back within a week, all the weight gain, even if they keep it super clean. Even a slight falling off the wagon for them will completely blow the weight back up. So the economist says there's 10 to 20 people, 10 to 20% of the population genetically, that even if they had a perfect exercise regimen, perfect diet regimen, it's extremely difficult for them to stay in good shape. So obesity is truly, and it's added by the fact that the society we live in, this is not going to be news to anyone. Look at the amount of processed everything we have, right? Just, it's readily available. Food cues are everywhere. I can't walk down the street without being, I want a slice of pizza. Literally. I go anywhere downtown. I see a pizza shop, you got to ask my wife, man, if I see Wendy's shop, I'm getting a slice, or I'm getting there's a whole societal cue thing where you're not even put in a position to succeed, right? And evolutionarily, we know why our bodies aren't meant to handle the caloric, the availability of calories in modern society is ridiculous, right? It's just something we are not, still our bodies are not evolutionarily meant to handle. So, I mean, the whole point I'm trying to say here is there is this moral component, but I think a lot of it is a bit unfair. And this is why this drug is so impactful. So, I mean, Jack, I'd love your thoughts on that, about kind of the moral element, and, there are limits to how much exercise can actually work for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not well versed enough in. I would listen to a conversation. Sorry, the baby's on the other side of the wall going nuts.
Yeah, no worries, we can't even hear it. But
all right, good. I think I've gone through this process of working with someone to try and understand nutrition at a fundamental level, and here's what you weigh, here's what you need to eat in order to get to this weight or this composition, and they give you the instructions, tell you what to cook, weigh it to the gram, and it's a chemical procedure, right? It's this goes in, this goes out, this happens. So my only experience with it is even when I eat less, but less of the wrong stuff, my body composition doesn't change in the same way as eating less of the right stuff. Does that make sense? It's there's so much nuance to this stuff that I think, because we're generally in a rush and want a conclusion that is the removal of the need to do a shitload of research, there's definitely, in a lot of cases, my body doesn't work this way. I've tried X, Y, or Z, but there's so many different factors affecting this stuff. The thing with the drug being available that kind of circumvents that is it breaks one of those feedback loops where it's essentially the same idea. You're just doing it with a different compound, right? Like you're saying that there's no combination of food and exercise or whatever that can help me, but this can. This particular set of compounds and chemicals arranged in this way is going to help me. So to me, it's like not as black and white as that. And the side effects of, or the way in which you could mask the feedback loop of the things you eat with ingesting something like that would be the biggest downside of this to me. Where it's like, you can suppress your appetite, but it won't necessarily make you eat things that are nurturing your body in the same way.
So
and weight
so
is
you
not,
might eat like 2,000 calories, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's all
Weight is
shitty
not
calories.
a great indicator of health, right?
Yeah.
I think
exactly. It's not the only
there's
one.
definitely
Body
it's
fat
a data
percentage.
point. It's a
Body
data
fat.
point taken in context of all these other things. And I totally understand people who are like, I mentally can't endure like eating chicken, broccoli, and rice every day. And as with everything in life, it's like there are trade-offs. Like you make decisions based on what you are willing to get and what you're willing to give up in order to get that. Like I now know what it takes to have 5% body fat, and I am not willing to give up the stuff in my life required to do it. I'm just not going to do it.
I mean, you live in Nashville, bro.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done it, right? I've got the pictures to prove it, and I'm done. I'm now
you
just
save
trying
that
not
for the
to
future, but
trying not to have a heart attack, trying not to, not be able to run around after my kids, remain reasonably healthy. I enjoy exercise. I enjoy eating well, but I also enjoy the occasional beer, indulging.
But
When was the single body fat percentage, Jack? Hold on before we sorry about that. I need to know this time period.
I feel like it's been since we've been on the pod, no? There was that time you had the personal trainer, or has it been way before?
I got it down. I've probably done it about 3 or 4 times now. I did it when I was like 20, when I was 21 or something. I could just do anything. So I'd
Look
definitely
Peter
have
Andre in that video. Mysterious girl.
I did a carnivore diet for 3 months. That'll get it off you fast. But that is insanely antisocial. You're going to brunch and you're eating like 90
Steak
rashers
only.
of bacon. This is just ridiculous.
Yo, although we need to pull this thread. We need to roast the people, because I've also been in phases where I'm like a really strict diet. You are just the worst human, right? Like I've yelled at my sibling for once ordering like normal crust pizza there. It was supposed to be a thin crust. Like he's like, what is this? What is this?
It's hard, man.
Crust.
And there's this big, there's this thing that goes around fairly often on Twitter as the like quality of European food versus American food. People are like, I just went to Europe and I ate whatever I wanted for 3 weeks and I'm 20 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
I think maybe there's some truth to that. Like there's less processed. Is it as a general rule? Like,
but you're also walking like 4,000 calories off walking around the Amalfi Coast like for 7 hours a day or whatever.
And you like portion size, like the culture around portion size is totally different.
Isn't that like when you move to the States? I don't know what it's like Canada versus US Trung, but just moving from the UK, and we're not especially the healthiest either in the UK. We're the Americans of Europe in that way. Like in terms of obesity rates are the same. That's what I meant by that. Like 50% plus overweight or obese or whatever the number is.
Fish and chips, son.
UK's been smashing it on that chart, right? They're climbing.
We're climbing the charts, exactly. But there is that thing when you just order a normal portion and you're like, damn, this is 2 portions pretty much. And then you get used to it. And then, like you said, there's so many factors. Like there's the palatability of certain foods. Like there's certain foods that are more satiating, etc. But I think, Trung, what you said earlier about like for a certain percentage of the population, it just won't work. And I do agree generally that there's a percentage, but I think the percentage is smaller than we would think. And I also think it's like what Jack just said there is exactly what I think is like people don't actually measure everything properly. That's kind of the tough one, because like I was speaking to someone about it the other day and we're trying to recall what they were eating in the week. And then they completely just forgot the weekend where they went and had 3 glasses of wine, a couple of beers with their friends. They forgot they had a kebab late at night. And if you average out those, if you add those calories up and then average out for the week, which is kind of what you should really do, you were then above your maintenance, right? So that you stayed in the same place. And
you know what else is crazy? Sorry, Bilal.
No, go for it. No, go for it.
I was going to say, even if you eat like that and you're like hyper vigilant on weighing stuff and then you try and eyeball it after that, like
it's not the same. Yeah.
You're nowhere near. Like somebody said to me, like, eat how you'd normally eat, and then like guess what you've made, and then weigh it. So put it down and say like, oh, it's roughly this much rice, this much protein, and then do the weighing and see how far off you are. You'll be unless you've done this for like 10 years and you know exactly what it is you're doing. Like a few weeks off that, and I honestly thought all this stuff was bullshit. I'll be completely honest. I was like, I never believed that there would be any material difference in like, oh, I'm going to eat 10 or 20 grams less of this a day. And like these protocols, they're tweaking it by 5 grams, 10 grams. Yeah. And it changes the outcome massively. Like your energy, your sleep, but there's a mental cost to doing that too. And you have to be a certain type of person, or you have to at least become a certain type of person to make the decision to do that, where it's like, instead of just spooning what I want to eat out of the bowl, I'm going to have this middle step of putting it on a per gram scale and then putting 10 grains of rice back. And sometimes you're just like doing that. I got mad about it. I was a month into it. I had the best results ever. And I'm just like, this is pissing me off. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. No, I so literally last night I cooked this thing up, and I'm doing the same thing because I'm measuring everything right now. And you literally, let's say I cooked this like lentil pasta I was having, and I'm looking at the bowl, and I'm like, oh, I'm just taking half of this. So you put half, and I'm like, oh, this must be half. And then I'm like, actually, I'm curious, like, let me just see if I was right. So I put them all on there, and I looked at the weight, and then took it off, and I'm like, oh, this was completely off. So there is a level of, like, most people, first of all, might not have, well, they would say they don't have the time to do it, right? Which, fair enough. I can't like judge everyone's time and schedule. I definitely have way more time than the average person, but it's also like a matter of prioritizing. I've made this literally the number one priority, that everything else becomes secondary, and that is like for a fairly short period of time, so that I don't have to do that for 2 years. It can be a few months. And so
it also depends on like why you're doing it. Like if you're doing it to like not get diabetes,
exactly. That's
like, what's the alternative is like injecting yourself with a foreign compound. Like they're both, I mean, I guess people don't see it as much of a trade-off, right? Like the ability to the
insulin needle is probably less of a disciplined thing than, like you said, you're measuring each grain of variety.
Yeah.
And like the result, again, you're talking about the result just being the number on the scale. That is not the totality of the result.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a single metric that, again, we have collectively decided to use as the thing that indicates you're this tall and you weigh this much, so you're good. And probably because that's like, in 90% of cases, that gives you a decent picture.
It's like how you do it for the general population of billions of people or 100 millions of people. But when you actually understand it more, you're like, why is there a BMI scale that like a 6 foot something X pounds person and someone who's 5'10" with the same weight is being classed as the same BMI or whatever? Like that might not be actually how it's done, but it's like all these things. It's like there's a lot of gray area. And so anyway, we could probably talk for like 2 hours about this stuff, so we can probably move on soon. Trug, are you there, or is your internet cut off? Because could you see, is this frozen? All right, cool.
That Canadian Wi-Fi, man. Canadian, he's hit his limit. Trudeau is capping him.
Trug, can you hear us? I can see his picture, but
I got one last point on this stuff. It's also really easy to go so far in the other direction, like listening to hundreds of hours of podcasts about how to sleep and what to eat, how 100%. To think. It's just like, what are we doing here, man? Like, there's got to be a happy medium, which I think the whole, like, taking the literal foreign compounds of engine oil out of food or whatever, like, the processed ingredients are that, like, sit in your body and make you feel like shit, like you can pretty much eat by eye and get good results if like the food you're eating is clean in inverted commas, and that's where this massive inequality comes in, because that shit is expensive.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
Organic meat, organic vegetables. You can eat amazingly good, tasty food, but it is not cheap. Like I remember the first time I moved to Brooklyn. I think Mate, 3 peppers, like 3 bell peppers, was like $10 when I moved there in 2010.
Yesterday, I paid $6.57 for like 2 peppers, and I was like, "What is going?"
What did you cook?
Oh, I cooked up that little, like a bolognese sauce. Oh. Yeah, like a nice little meat sauce.
Mate,
yeah,
and
then nice.
you get nice. a 2-pound bag of Lucky Charms, knock off Lucky Charms, off brand.
Yeah,
for $6 or something. I remember the first, like, I was on a ridiculous. Mate, I was on such a ridiculously low budget when I moved to New York. I was making $600 a month, living in New York. It's like, what do you eat on that? Lucky Charms, and I know I get
$600 a month. Jesus Christ, mate!
Then there was this Chinese takeaway that did soup, salad, drink, and like General Tso's and rice for $5. This is in 2010.
Oh my God!
And it was lunch and dinner.
That's still not. That's not like 1995. You know what I mean? That's cheap. No.
So that was big enough for my lunch and dinner. So I have it at work and then take that back. My food budget there is Lucky Charms and Chinese for lunch and dinner.
But I'm not gonna lie, General Tso's chicken is one of the greatest American inventions I've ever had, man. It is so good.
Incredible,
my favorite place is there's a place in Williamsburg, like East Williamsburg, that is a Mexican-run Chinese place. And the menu is Chinese food, but with like a Spanish menu, and it's incredible.
Sick. I bet it's incredible. Man,
What?
And if you're a young, man in your early 20s, you can just basically do anything. For a lot of people, like the leeway is so much more ridiculous. So
not investment advice. Not investment advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that clip's coming back to haunt you, Jack.
Not that you should. I'm just saying, my experience comes from this place where I was like, I could do that. And I would work out every day back then, but my metabolism was just off the chain, just ridiculous. Yeah. Like I would kill for that now. Like I was back then you're like, I'm going to have this forever. This is great. I would eat a roll of cookies, like a, full, remember Lidl, Bilal?
Yeah, of course.
They had this Tower Gate. They were called Tower Gate cookies. They were 19 pence for a whole box. And I would eat the whole box every time. That's time
insane.
I have not half, I'd eat the whole box and drink 4 pints of milk while I'm eating it.
4 pints of milk? That is hilarious. That is a funny. What the hell were you doing? How high were you eating this?
No, mate, no, zero. Just like endless appetite.
Yeah.
It definitely differs.
Pints of milk.
That's hilarious. The funniest is the milk, right, Trunk? That
addition
of the milk is so good.
I love milk.
Yeah, incredible. I love milk. Someone needs to make a t-shirt for you there, Jack, man. Jack loves milk. God, Trong, what are you saying?
No, I was just saying, I know that we were supposed to cut this one a little bit shorter today because at Inside Baseball for the listeners, we're doing a double record today because your boy's gone next week. But I just wanted to kind of put a pin in this obesity stuff with everything, wrap up everything you guys said.
Yeah, do it.
I totally agree with what Jack said regarding one of the potential side effects of this really effective weight loss drug. And just to give you an idea, the average user in the early testing for Novo, which is the Danish manufacturer of this drug, which is insane. Their market cap has doubled in the past year on the strength of this drug. They were like a $300 billion company. I mean, that's part of what's so scary about it, right? Is that it's a drug you have to continuously use. So I know the skeptic and cynic and everyone is like, oh, okay, we get it. We created the problem of obesity with industrialized processed food, and now we're going to sell you the cure, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's that whole aspect of it, which listen, I'm very sympathetic to that. But like Jack said, is like, if you can just do once a month injections now and they're working on a pill, your habits might just go to complete shit, right? Is like, I mean, Bilal talked about what it does to suppress your appetite. So it works on your hypothalamus, which controls your hunger. It does something called, here's the exact phrase, which is kind of crazy. It's gastric emptying. So, I mean, it just means you take a shit earlier, right?
We did that this morning, mate. Yeah, that's...
No, but basically
I used to call myself media delivery person when I was that.
media delivery person.
Well, you guys will laugh. So gastric emptying is just when it is exactly what it sounds like, right? But the whole point is this drug slows that process down, so the food just kind of stays inside you longer, and that's why you feel satiated, right? And it kind of touches on the point of, well, what is the best procedure now? What is the most effective procedure to kind of deal with obesity? I mean, one of them is bariatric surgery, stapling your stomach, which is you literally put a staple or a band around the stomach and the intestine to limit how much food can be held, and it also slows down this gastric emptying, right? So that typically loses 30% of weight.
And these are interesting contradictions to some of the other narratives too, where it's like people are built a certain way that they can't lose weight.
Yeah, that's interesting. But
Like
you're saying that stapling the stomach happens to work though, because it stopped your appetite, which then goes to the macro point of you needed to be eating less, and whatever got you to that was.
No, but it's like physiologically
Yeah,
helping you to eat less,
Impossible
right?
to eat more.
yeah, it's
yeah.
literally impossible. Yeah, it makes it harder for you
Or
to
say
overeat and stuff.
you're physiologically being prevented from doing that. So this drug, again, there are such moral and health and societal implications, which is why I think it's super important. It's like obesity is truly, all the things that, we talked about already. We talked about diabetes for some people. It's like, what is the purpose of why you're doing this? It goes back to exactly what we started this with your sister-in-law is, okay, are you using this for vanity and for consumption so you look better on Instagram, or are you using it because you have to deal with diabetes? And there's a shortage, right? And yeah, I think it's worth flagging for the listeners. That was kind of the big takeaway for me.
No, it's definitely an interesting topic.
And
Jack, were you about to say something? Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say the line blurs between what is defined as health too. Like for some people, looking good on Instagram is like, they would consider that health, right? In the macro sense. Like if I can't share a picture of myself that I'm proud of, like I'm not well. So it's like all of this stuff, we're like trapped in language and definitions and like, this is right, this is wrong. It's really, really like impossible, I think, to have to come to a conclusion that is like, it is right in this scenario and wrong in that scenario. I think like the fact that people who are like on their deathbed or near their deathbed or severely physically impaired, not being able to get access to this is a massive problem, right? But the reason this thing is going to continue exploding is because everybody has some relationship with that part of their life, identity, health, even more than like a Viagra, right? A lot of people age out of the Viagra market, or like their behavior changes where Viagra is no longer
age
something.
in sometimes too.
Yeah, Jack, you got the wrong order of operation, dude. You literally,
that's the clip for the week. Let's get one on
ED, and for the listeners that don't know what ED is, you can just Google that. But yeah, it's not only just an older individual.
Sorry, I had to say that.
You get what
No,
I'm
but
saying.
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
Funny.
you're right. Well, this is and what I was just gonna say my last thoughts on it as well, because I agree with everything you guys said. It's not simple. It's not like this is bad, this is good. I think in many cases it's very helpful for someone if it's going to help them accelerate something that they're going to be able to keep off long term, and that makes them a healthier person. I think that's a positive thing. The only thing I'll say is I think, especially in America and generally in the West, but especially in America, the way our medical system is designed veers very quickly to here's a medicine that's going to fix this thing, where it's not, a lot of the time you're not looking at the root causes. And I would say the same for depression and anxiety. I'd say the same for, all this health stuff. Like there's a time where you need antidepressants, right? But I think it's overprescribed by 10x. Like a lot of people haven't even like spent time talking to therapists, speaking to a friend, trying to figure out, why they hate their lives. And then they all of a sudden think like a pill's going to just save them. And it gives them a temporary high and they feel a bit better. And then they think they basically have to take that forever. Right. And same with this. It's like, you can get the scales to go down 10 pounds quicker using this than not. But when it comes back and now you're in the shit again and you're like, man, I feel so terrible about myself that I put this all back on again. You're now in a worse place, which again happens to 90% of people like that lose that amount of weight. So I think it's just a matter of, I think these are tools, and if they're studied correctly with real science, which they obviously are doing right now, but it's still quite early with this use case, because I think for diabetes, that's what most of the testing was done on diabetes, and this is now being used by way more people for another purpose. I think there are some downsides that you need to kind of accept if you're ever going to take it. So yeah, I think it's more like looking at the root problems is really what's going to help in this situation, and I don't think society is set up to do that. We want the quick fix. We want the pill that's going to make us feel good in that moment, and that's not how it works long term. You're not going to be happier necessarily.
You know what's to blame, Bilal?
What is it, mate?
Fiat currency.
Yeah. All comes back to fiat currency. All right, boys, I think that's a great way to finish off the episode, because we do need to get this one out for you guys next week, which if you're interested, we're going to be doing some good philosophical talk. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one next week as well. So make sure you're subscribed if you're here for the first time. Boys, anything else on that before we wrap it up?
Well, let's just, we're going to be talking about ideas that change our lives, like next week on this show. Okay?
Next week. Here's the preview.
We'll make sure to put the proper information at the bottom there. This is not medical advice, but
definitely not.
I'll send all the links. The other podcast, Bilal, you mentioned a couple of links. We should put one with Rhonda Patrick where she talks about it.
Yeah.
I just think it's worth I think it's gonna be a big issue. I think it's gonna be a huge issue, and
definitely
much more prevalent in the next following years.
Let us know if you're on it. Comment down below if you're thinking about it. Let us know. We're interested to hear what people's takes are. I will say that SoundPath thread, there were lots of people saying I did this, I had these negative side effects, and other people saying positive. That's where I was reading about it on the pod. So let's get on to the next episode. But we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.